let's begin with chapter 12 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So, in this final chapter, what we find, we see that Alice is being called to provide evidence in the trial of Knave of Hearts. We have seen in the previous chapter only, in chapter 11, that the Knave of Hearts is being accused of stealing the tarts. The Mad Hatter has been called to be the witness, but the witness that was provided by the Mad Hatter was inconclusive, very inconclusive, more in the terms with the caucus race, where the winner was not clearly understood. Similarly, what we find here is that in this section we will see this witness of Alice asking to be the witness is a kind of surprise element. Okay, for Alice, it is a surprise element. Clear? Alice jumps up and she tries to go forward to be the witness, but she forgets that, or she forgot that she had grown so large that she tips over the jury box with the edge of her skirt. Okay, reminding her very much of the globe of a goldfish she had accidentally upset a week before. So there is a constant contact or realization or connection between the real world and the this world. So this exactly worded account and the fact that the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head is actually suggesting that Carol is actually teasing Alice Liddell. Okay, maybe possibly to amuse her sisters by giving this information. Okay, by introducing a mildly embarrassing real life accident that had happened at the deanery, or in the deanery to say, with the fish ball. There might be a inside joke or inside place of laughter to be given. Okay, of course, in this Wonderland, this will not be the last time that Alice literally upsets the court, but this foreshadows, okay, what is to come. Okay, and the matter of the great size, which is both physically and metaphorically, suggests that her growing power and influence in the Wonderland. Why? Because in this Wonderland everything is subverted. Okay, here animals or even non-living things hold the most important powers in this Wonderland, like the pack of cards. Okay, whereas the most important thing in real life, in realistic space, that is in, what can you say, in Alice's space, in Alice's place, human beings are the most important thing, but in Wonderland human beings are the least important thing. Clear? But what we see here is that in the meantime, in the beginning, Alice was not able to control her size. She would be in a position where she could continuously get affected by the greatness of her height or the small, the tiny shape of her. What we find here is that again she is changing her size, but this time it is uncontrollable. And this suggests that there might be a possibility that she is completing her circle. As we know, this is a dream beforehand only. It might be a possibility that the full circle is complete and she is coming to her own realizations of her power, of her influence over everything that is happening. ঠিক আছে, সে ডোয়ার্ফ হয়ে আর থাকছে না, বা সে হচ্ছে যাকে বলে একদম অন্যের উপর ডিপেন্ডেন্ট হয়ে থাকছে না, অন্য কি করবে সেটার উপর ডিপেন্ডেন্ট হয়ে থাকছে না, অন্য কি বলবে তার উপর ডিপেন্ডেন্ট হয়ে থাকছে না, বা কোনো মাশরুমের উপর ডিপেন্ডেন্ট হয়ে থাকছে না, right? So what we find here is that this presentation of Alice growing back to her own size is a reminder of her own power. Clear? And that is what is happening in Lewis Carroll's portrait with background. Donald Thomas draws number of comparison between Wonderland and the Greco-Roman conditions and everything. So what we find here is that this description is very important for understanding the condition of Alice that she is in. Okay, so there are several things that are happening over here. Okay, there are constant reference to book 4 of Aeneid, where there is this comment on the justice of the underworld, where including the judicial system of the Queen of Hearts. So what we find here is that there is this Dodson publication of Wonderland. There is this coincidental or another Oxford classist who is there, Arthur Sidgwick, who is younger friend of Dodson, who actually found out this famous line. So Virgil was a famous line from its inversion of natural order of justice, because there is no natural order of justice. Okay, so in the trial of the Knave of Hearts is clearly a product of the mind of Charles Dodson, okay, who is a mathematician and a logician, and Dodson is using this technique, this extensive mathematical work, as a symbolic logic. Okay, so to describe, mainly to power to detect the fallacies and the tear pieces, the flimsy illogical things that are present. But what we find here is that although there is this symbolic logic, it was not written for children. The teaching of logic to children was a hobby for Dodson. Okay, he frequently gave talks to girls about everything, about the schools on this discipline, about discipline in the schools. But what we find here is that the trial of the knave has elements of logical gameplay within it. Okay, and the challenge for Alice is to discover the rules and the nature of the game. This is a difficult task, as a formalist concern for everyday use and everything, but rather with formal proofs that may be totally independent of reality in terms of everyday language. Okay, so what we find here is that although Dodson has this great tradition, but he has to keep up with the story, right? He has to, though he has this numerous mathematical conclusions and logical explanation, but he has to keep up with the story. So what he is doing, he is bringing this logical conclusion within this story, where we see that Alice is jumping to the white rabbit's call, because white rabbit is the herald over here, and she forgets that she has grown larger and knocks over the jury stamp, then scrambles to put all the jurors back. And Alice claims to know nothing whatever about the tarts which the king deems very important. Okay. To this, the white rabbit corrects the king, suggesting that he is in fact means unimportant. Okay, so the king agrees, muttering the words important and unimportant to himself. So at once he is saying important, and at another moment he is saying unimportant. And that is why I am bringing in the logic question. If you know what is logic and how logic functions or works, um, or if you know the binary system, it is based on yes or no, or 0 or 1 binary. Okay, so what we find here is that 0 and 1, this binary system is the basis of all computer application that is happening today. The whole computer application that runs on 0 and 1, nothing more than that. That is yes or no. Okay, so similarly, this thing is happening with the king, whether Alice knows about the witness or no. Alice says that she doesn't know anything, and the king says it is very important, that is yes, ঠিক হ্যাঁ ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিস সে জানে না, বাট অ্যাকচুয়ালি সে যে জানে না সেটা তো অ্যাকচুয়ালি আনইম্পর্টেন্ট হওয়ার কথা, তাই না? সে জানলে সেটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট হবে. সো দ্য কিং ইজ অলসো কনফিউজড what is actually happening, because as I have told you in the previous class also, that if you try to find meaning in this wonderland, you will never find a meaning, because the Cheshire Cat has only said that this is a crazy world, this is madness, this is a place where you cannot find logic. And after following those words of the Cheshire Cat, Alice was able to live in a more peaceful way, or deal with things in a more peaceful way. But what we find here, the king is trying to be logical person, and it is creating a much more chaos than it should have created. Clear? So what we find here is that there is so many arguments because of this. Okay, because of this description, there is this so many arguments. What we find here is that this is why there are so many constant, what can you say, double negatives in the speech. Okay, especially in Griffon, where this is a fact of double negation, where we find that the queen's attempt in chapter number 9, I think, or 7, I do not remember clearly now, where she says that to behead the bodiless Cheshire Cat. Okay, this is a bizarre demonstration of what is known as the axiom of nothing. Okay, why this is so? This is because how can you behead a person or a thing which is already beheaded? You cannot find a logic. Similarly, in the dispute over the validity of the so-called letter by the knave, Alice says that I do not believe there is an atom of meaning in it, quote unquote. I do not believe there is an atom of meaning in it. And the king replies, if there is no meaning in it, that saves the world of trouble. You know, as we need not try to find any. So if you do not need to find any, why you are trying to find any conclusion to it? Why you are trying to give this knave a punishment? Right? So what we find here is that this kind of logical explanation is completely baseless, that is happening over here. Though the king is saying that we do not need to find out any meaning, yet what the king says, and yet I don't know, says the king, as he continues to examine the evidence. He then begins to deconstruct the evidence in the knave's letter by reducing it to what logicians would call atomic sentences, or in Alice's system, atom of a meaning. So king is required to reduce everything to the atomic units. Okay, that was I was talking about 0 and 1s, that is either true or false, or yes or no. So what we find here is that this description, by this description, king will not ask for the identity of he or she or what it is. But the trial of the Knave of Hearts is full of legal as well as lot of mathematical and logical puns. Okay, and this was mirrored by the White Rabbit's reminder that the king must cross-examine the witness. Although Carol makes a punning joke of of all these things by having the king interpreting it literally, what we find here is that it makes a quite confusing stance that is happening. Okay, so in the meantime, the king interjects rule number 42. Okay, in which he states that all person, and I quote, all person more than a mile high to leave the court. Okay, that he is asking Alice to leave the court. Everyone turns to Alice to that, and Alice denies that she is a mile high and accuses the king of fabricating the rule or the law. Okay, to which the king replies that the rule number 42 is the oldest rule in the book. To which Alice retorts that if this was the oldest rule, then it would not have been rule number 42, but it would have been rule number 1. Okay, so what we find here is that king becomes quiet for a moment before calling for a verdict, and to this the White Rabbit is asking for more evidence. Okay, and what we find here is that this paper that is being presented, supposedly written by the knave, and it is thoroughly checked and thoroughly tried to be examined by the people, tried to be examined by the jury. Okay, so what we find here is that this description of this whole stance is that whether the knave is guilty or not, but it is being depicted in such a coagulated way, such a complex way, that you cannot understand what the thing is happening. Okay, so the White Rabbit now presents the paper, which is a letter and is supposedly written by the knave, though it is not written in the knave's handwriting, but they consider that it is written by the knave. Okay, though there is also no signing in the end or anywhere. Okay, so the knave says that only, that he refutes the charge that he has written this letter because there is no signature to the document and it is not even in his handwriting. The king reasons that the knave must have meant mischief because he did not sign the note like an honest man would. But the question is, if he has not written the letter only, why would he sign it? Addition to that, his handwriting does not match with it, right? So the court seems pleased by the reasoning that the queen also concludes that the paper proves that the knave is guilty. Okay, see the condition, see the complexity over here, that you do not have any proof against the knave, but he is proved to be guilty. Alice then demands to read the poem on the paper. While the paper appears to have no meaning, the king provides an explanation and calls for a verdict. So there is no meaning to it, but there is this arbitrariness that is being provided by the king, meaning which is provided to him. Okay, the queen demands that the sentence um, come before the verdict, and this is also an opposite thing. And to this, anyone would justify যে কখনোই কি কোনো সেন্টেন্স মানে কোনো রায় দান তোকে কাউকে হচ্ছে বলে দেবে কি তুই 10 বছরের ফাঁসি হবে, 10 বছরের ফাঁসি তো হয় না, 10 বছরের হচ্ছে প্রিজন হবে বিফোর considering him to be a guilt or considering him to be a guilty person. Okay, so what we find here is that this is completely opposite stance that is being proven over here. So see, queen concludes that this paper proves the knave to be guilty, right? While the poem appears to have no meaning, in spite of that the king provides explanation and calls for a verdict, and to which the queen demands that the sentence comes before the verdict. And in reply to this, Alice chaps at this proposal and criticizes the king, who calls for Alice's beheading. Obviously, sentence কখনো কি আগে হয়, মানে ভার্ডিক্টের আগে কি কখনো সেন্টেন্স হয়? ইউ নিড টু সে what are his guilts. ওকে, সে কি অপরাধ করেছে সেই সমস্ত বলতে হবে, রাইট? তারপর হচ্ছে তুমি তাকে বলতে পারবে যে কি করেছে, তারপর হচ্ছে তাকে কি শাস্তি হবে সেটা তুমি বলবে। ওকে, সো this is what is happening over here, that this person who is actually innocent is facing the challenges of the society. In this wonderland, he is facing the challenges because everyone is irrational. They do not understand, they do not try to understand what the situation is. They are illogical in this sense. And when one protests to that, Alice, only Alice is protesting obviously, and Alice is being called a traitor, not called a traitor actually, but it was adjusted that she is a traitor or something, and the queen asks for Alice's beheading. So in the meantime, Alice has grown to her full size and bats away all the playing cards as they fly upon her and everything. So to this is a very direct attack on Alice, right? Alice tries to find out what is actually happening in all of the situation and everything, but what we find here is that there is no meaning to it, but everyone is trying to present their stance where they want to prove that the knave of hearts is guilty. Clear? So Carroll, the author, he was a logician, right? And we also knew him as a comic writer. So the great secret of this nonsense literature is that it is extremely sensible to understand the conditions of the society, because these things happen. People who are innocent, they have no evidence against him, still they are punished. Okay, that is, nonsense is humorous only if it works within the logical framework. Okay, in this courtroom of this king and the queen of hearts, Alice has unknowingly entered into what form it is of a philosopher, logician, and also the mathematician. Okay, he has entered there in order to challenge the cosmos that is present, or the environment that is present within the, what can you say, the wonderland. It is a heartless and frightening place, and the monstrous queen is well suited to be its ruler, and logicians uh, like this person Alice is trying to refute her, and only when she is trying to challenge that, everyone or everything is trying to uh, outdo her. Okay, so that is what is being presented over here. But Alice suddenly wakes up and finds herself back on her sister's lap at the river bank. She tells her adventures to her sister, who bids her to go inside for tea. Um, Alice traipses off while her sister um, still remains by the riverbank daydreaming. And now her sister envisions the characters from Alice's adventures. Okay, so Alice tries to uh, invoke an ultimate contradiction and rejects Queen's authority. Okay, the king, queen, knave, and all the cards are simply made entirely of cardboard, right? The laws in this heartless court have no power over Alice. Okay, the laws are heartless. Okay, so she challenges the queen and says that, who cares for you? You are nothing but a pack of cards. So this is the power that she was trying to achieve, or everyone, or the guidance was there for her to achieve. Okay, for Alice, human values and the concerns of the human heart ultimately must trump this heartless tyranny of this abstract mathematics, or the, what can you say, non-living things. Okay, once confronted with Alice's evidence, the house of cards collapse in a heap. Okay, and the dreamer awakes, that is, Alice awakes into the real world. Clear? So that is what is being presented over here, and what we find here is that the horrors, the predictions that were there in Virgil's Aeneid and everything, similar kind of thing is happening over here. Okay, there is cruelty, there is tyranny, but they are nothing but a pack of cards, and Alice has the power. Alice can overcome all those things which are against her. Clear? So what we find here is that this is actually a stance that Alice is taking in order to exert her power as a grown-up person, as a person who knows everything, okay, who can control everything. That is being presented over here. So as Alice's sister imagines that Alice or imagines Alice's adventures, but knows that when she opens her eyes, the images that will be there during the adventures will actually dissipate. Okay, she imagines that Alice will one day grow older, but actually retain her childlike spirit and recount her adventures to other children. Clear? So two things we need to focus on here is that the chapter title. The title of this chapter is Alice's Evidence. Right. It refers both to the evidence that Alice gives during the trial, and also the evidence that she discovers that Wonderland is a dream. Okay, and that she can control by waking up, and she can control everything that is within this Wonderland. She is not a subject over there, but she is the all-conquering power. Okay, Alice realizes during this trial that all does not matter a bit. Okay, what the jury records, or whether the jury is upside down or right side, whatever, right side up, nothing. None of the details of the orientation of the Wonderland have any bearing, or can you say coherent meaning to it. Okay, even Alice's growth during the trial showcases her growing awareness of the fact that this wonderland is an illusion. Okay, she starts to grow when Mad Hatter bites into his teacup in previous chapter, right? And what we see here is that she reaches the full height during the heated exchange with the queen, and she points out, and as I said, that she says that you are nothing but a pack of cards. Okay, so Alice exposes the wonderland as an illusion, and her growth to the full size comes with a realization that she has a measure of control over the illusions. Okay, so what we find here is that this growth is not just physical but also mental. Okay, this mental ability is being achieved by her. Once she understands that this is a dream, she wakes up and shatters the illusion. Okay, she has this full grasp of this nonsensical nature of this wonderland when King tries to interpret the Knave's poem. She disputes with the king with the nonsense words that are present within the poem. So Alice's criticism are ironic, and what we find here is that she attempted to make sense of the various other situations in the stories she has encountered before also, but she finally understands that everything is futile in this wonderland, and trying to make a meaning out of these adventures in the wonderland is incomprehensible. Okay, so this message is meant not only for Alice but for the readers of Alice in Wonderland as well. Just as the king is trying to find out meanings in the poem, Carol sends a message to the readers or anyone who will try to attempt to find out a meaning. Alice's Wonderland is an actively present as a story, but at the same time you cannot be present in it as a logical person. Okay, so what we find here is that these accounts are have diverse criticism, obviously, as I have told you, because there are allusions to mythology, real life and everything. Obviously those are present, but these stories are actually important to understand what is actually happening in real world, and at the same time you have to take it in a light-hearted way. In the end, what do you find? Alice returns to her dreaming body by the sister's side under a tree on the river bank, and that is her everyday life. Now, though Alice has a wise soul to her, wise old soul to say, but she retains the memory of her dream world, and she recounts her experience to her sister. Then too, what we find? Her sister, her name is Lorena, began dreaming after in the same fashion, picturing herself passing on Alice's dream to other children. What we find here is that while the author records them in the dedicated book in which is written all that each has heard or seen, so the story of the adventure and the revealed mystery of the wonderland might enter the minds and the imagination of the children throughout the world, and it will be passed on from ages to ages. Okay, so that is what is being presented over here, and to this what we find? We find that this pictured self of her, this pictured self of the wonderland actually gives her or arranges or gives a narrative symmetry, maybe changes the tone obviously from Alice's journey from harrowing the quest of the childhood fantasy. But what we find here is that there is a reintroduction of the calm scene by the river bank. Okay, so the story transforms back to reality, back from adventure, obviously. This novella, Alice's sister, ends the novella by changing the tone of the Alice's story. Okay, by discounting the nightmarish qualities and favoring the dreamy nostalgia for simple, loving hearted childhood. The sister's interpretation reduces Alice's experience of trauma and trivializes the journey as little more than a strange tale, quote unquote. Okay, and Alice may eventually recount to her children. Okay, so what we find here is that this is nothing more than a child story. The narrative that is being presented over here is being presented as nothing more than a child story in the end, by changing the narrative style, by changing the stance, by changing it into a dream. So there is this horrific stance where there is race, where there is beheading and everything, but it will be recounted as nothing but a funny, nonsensical story which would be appropriate for children, which might not be seen when you see the allusions of the real life world and everything. But if you try to remove all those things, all those real life allusions or the mythological allusions that are brought into the story, which are real obviously for Dodson, but if you try to remove those things and completely focus on the adventure, a simple adventure of a person who has fallen asleep, that would be a story for the children. And that is the way the narrative is changed in this story by the sister. Okay, by bringing in the calm effect. So this is the end of the story.